Inquiry is now in session. Please be seated.
Good morning. Mr. McDowell?
Yes, by agreement with counsel for Mr. McCallion, Mr. McCallion will be examined by Mr. Gover, and then I think we'll have a bit of a discussion as to who gets the pole position after that, but let's get the examination in chief done.
All right. Mr. Gover?
Do you wish to be sworn?
Has the witness been sworn?
Not yet. Please stand. Wish to be sworn in the Bible or make an affirmation?
No, in the Bible.
Bible. State your name in full.
Peter McCallion,
Spell your last name for the record.
McCallion.
I swear the evidence you're about to put the court in this inquiry should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self God.
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning, Mr. McCallion.
Good morning, Mr. Gover.
Now, I understand, sir, that you're 57 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
You are divorced.
Yes.
You have one daughter who's 21 years old. Is that right?
21, yeah.
Now, by way of education, I understand, sir, that you completed grade 12. Is that right, sir?
That is correct.
Currently, you are employed selling new homes for Dezen Construction in Mississauga. Is that correct?
Mississauga, and we sold some in Brampton.
And can you help me with this, Mr. McCallion? Do you require a real estate license in order to sell new homes?
No, you do not.
I understand, however, that you are currently registered as a real estate agent. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And you have held a real estate license since the mid-1980s. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
I understand that there have been a couple of occasions when your real estate license has been suspended for one reason or another. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I understand that one of those occasions was in January 2007?
Yeah, based on continuing education.
And based on continuing education, what do you mean by that, Mr. McCallion?
Well, every 2 years you have to complete 24 credits.
And I take it you failed to meet all of those obligations. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
And more recently, your license was suspended for a period of time for non-payment of some sort of fees or insurance. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
And you've said insurance?
Insurance, yes.
Now, in your experience then for approximately 25 years in real estate, what type of real estate have you sold?
Well, in the beginning I sold homes, then I moved into commercial, in terms of land, buildings, etc.
I take it you've acted for purchasers as well?
Yes.
Has your work in the real estate field been focused in a particular geographical area?
Not specifically, no. In the GTA.
In the Greater Toronto Area then?
Correct.
Mr. McCallion, you live here in Mississauga, is that right?
Yes, I grew up here.
You've lived here all your life?
All my life. Streetsville.
And I understand, Mr. McCallion, that your parents had a printing and newspaper business in Streetsville, is that correct?
I worked there quite a bit.
Your father died in 1997?
Yes.
I understand that he'd been ill for some 5 years, is that right, sir?
Yeah, with Alzheimer's.
Now, we've heard a rumor that your mother is the mayor of Mississauga, Mr. McCallion.
I heard the same rumor.
I understand that your mother has been involved in municipal politics since you were a teenager.
Yes, since high school, that I recall.
And that her involvement in municipal politics predates the creation of Mississauga itself. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
Now, you've told us that you've been involved in real estate for some 25 years or so. Do you have a perception as to whether your mother's role as mayor for some 30 years or more, 32 I suppose by my arithmetic, has been a benefit or a detriment to you in your work?
More so a detriment than a benefit.
What do you mean by that, Mr. McCallion?
Some people don't want to deal with me because of the perception of conflict.
Do you perceive, you say more so a detriment than a benefit?
Definitely.
What benefit do you see?
I get to meet a lot of people.
I'd like to turn now to land in the city center of Mississauga, and in particular, land in the vicinity of Square One Shopping Mall and the Living Arts Center.
Yes.
And I understand that you became aware of parcels of land that you understood were owned by owners or through a subsidiary, perhaps. Is that right,
Yes.
sir? And in connection with that land, you understood it was owned by owners. Do you now, or did you learn along the way that there was a co-owner involved?
Correct, afterwards, yes.
What was that co-owner, according to your understanding?
It was a numbered company at the time.
Now, returning to Square One Shopping Mall and the Living Arts Center, in what we call downtown Mississauga, were you aware of any initiative, any drive toward a particular type of construction project in that area?
Well, it was well known, publicly known, that the city would like to have a hotel next to the Living Arts Center.
And did you have any understanding as to whether official plans or other plans published by the city of Mississauga envisioned a convention center and a hotel in that area?
I believe it was in the official plan.
Now, when we talk about the city center and the concept of a hotel being built there, first of all, we're talking about two parcels that you understood at the time were owned by owners. Had you previously had any interest in developing land in that vicinity for the purposes of building a hotel?
Not prior to 2002, no.
Understood.
I was aware of the land from previous years before, I believe, when the ownership was under Hammerson. And I believe that there were some prepaid levies on the land.
Right. Now, had you had listings for other land in the vicinity in previous years?
Yes, I had a listing for Johnny Lombardi's 29 acres on the inside the city core.
And what distance would that have been from the two parcels that we're concerned with now near the Living Arts Center?
A couple thousand feet.
What does that mean, 2,000 feet away?
Roughly, yes. That's a guesstimate.
Right. And how much land did Mr. Lombardi own?
I think it was 29.5 acres, actually.
And
Fronting on Burnhamthorpe up to Rathburn.
can you tell us what your involvement was there?
Well, I had it actively for sale for quite some time. I also represented Mr. Lombardi on the City Center Marketing Alliance, which was put together by the City of Mississauga to promote the city core.
What period are we speaking of now when you had this listing of land in that vicinity for Mr. Lombardi and you represented him on the alliance?
It'd be the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
What did you understand to be the benefits, if any, of having a hotel and convention center in the city core?
Well, it's instrumental to helping with the Living Arts Center, and vice versa. It works both ways for the hotel as well as the Living Arts Center.
Now, Mr. McCallion, the inquiry has already heard of a corporation referred to as World Class Developments.
Yes.
And we understand you had a role in incorporating that company.
Yes, I did.
Now, before we go there, let's deal with some background. You've told us that you were aware of this land that you understood was owned by owners,
Yes.
and that you were aware of the city's plan, if I can call it that, for construction of a hotel and convention center in the area. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
Now, apart from what you've told us about a previous listing that you had for Mr. Lombardi, how did you become involved in the concept of building a hotel and convention center in the city center on the Omer's land? We'll start at the beginning if we can.
Yes. Well, a Chinese businessman, Mr. Li Shim, came to me and said he was interested in building a hotel with condos in the city core.
Thank you. Let's stop there. When was that, sir?
That'd be 2002.
Now, Mr. Shim, you've told us, was interested in building a hotel and convention center in the city center. Is that right?
Correct.
Did you understand that Mr. Shim intended to do this alone or with others?
No, he had business partners in China.
Did you take any steps in light of this expression of interest by Mr. Shim?
I put a little bit of a presentation together and flew over with him to China to meet his partners.
And did that meeting take place?
Yes, it lasted about 5 minutes.
Do you remember how many of the people you met with there?
I don't remember all their names, but there was probably 4 or 5. There was one specific man that I did meet several times called the Marble King.
Well, and I take it that was a nickname?
Yeah.
and maybe you could tell us how we acquired that nickname.
Well, I believe that he owned, at the time, about 80% of the marble market in China. He's passed away since.
So, Mr. McCallion, you made this presentation in China to these would-be investors. Did anything come of that, sir?
No, nothing came of it.
By the way, you said you were approached by Mr. Shim in 2002. When did the presentation take place?
It was in December 2002.
Now, after December 2002, what was the next step in your involvement in this concept of building a hotel and convention center on the Omer's land?
Well, nothing happened for at least 2 years to 4 years, 2 to 3 years. Nothing happened.
Right, and at the end of that 2 to 3 years, what happened then, Mr. McCallion?
Well, I was approached by someone else who knew some Korean investors looking to invest in Canada, Mr. Gary Aitchison.
So then Mr. Aitchison approached you.
Yes, I knew him from a friend.
And was it explained to you who these investors were?
They were from Korea, fairly wealthy. He did give me the name. I've since forgotten it. And they wanted to invest in Canada.
Now, you told us you made a presentation to Mr. Shim 2 or 3 years earlier. Did you make a presentation to this group?
Not specifically. I took it to a couple of developers, hoping that they would be able to put something together. Only one of them did, Mr. Moldenhauer.
And that's Moldenhauer, is that correct?
No. I've forgotten how to spell it right now.
Fair enough.
And he put a package together, but 2 pages, and we sent it off. They were not impressed. And they came back to me and said, you put a development team together and we'll finance it.
First of all, you mentioned you approached 2 developers, one of whom was Mr. Moldenhauer.
Yes.
What's his first name, sir?
Michael.
And had Mr. Moldenhauer had any experience in development in Mississauga?